Well, hello YouTube, this is Greg. Thanks for stopping by to visit my channel. I got some notes a few weeks ago when I was showing off some of my favorite double bit axes, and a friend from Europe sent me a question and an observation that he noted that on one of the axes it didn't appear to have a secondary metal wedge on top of the wooden wedge. And the reason for that, he was right. He observed that a couple of the axes, probably all of them, it's been a while since I've used a metal wedge as a secondary on really anything. And it has to do mainly, I think, with a little bit of common sense. Frequently, if you purchase ready-made handles and fit them, the kerf may not come all the way down into the bottom or toward the bottom of the axe head. I have, it's been a while, I've fitted some in years past where the kerf came maybe an inch or two down into the head. When that happens, I take a handsaw and extend the kerf down to within about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch, where the bottom of the axe head would rest on the shoulders of the handle. It seems like it would be a little intuitive, maybe it's not, that when you hammer in the wedge, if the kerf only goes an inch or so in, then the handle is only going to be expanding in that inch or so of stock that goes down into the top of the axe head and protrudes out the end. And physics being what it is, the wedge essentially is an inclined plane, and if the wedge, for instance, has a 30-degree angle, probably more like 20, but at a 20-degree angle when you hammer it in, it's going to push the outside edges of the handle head out about 10 degrees on each side. If I can get at least 10 degrees on each side, the axe handle is not going to come off of that. Also, before I hang an axe, I make sure the handle is dry. You can either use the autoclave in the surfboard factory that we use before we join plates of epoxy. Join plates together with epoxy because they need be cured at about 400 degrees in an autoclave, and if they're not dry, you have steam expanding at an alarming rate and mild explosions in the autoclave. I ruined 2 or 3 guitars and a cello that way by sticking them in an autoclave without having dried the plates first. So if you dry out the handles and the wedges before hanging them and then seat them tight, and when hammering in the wedge, I will usually pour my oil of choice, whether it's boiled linseed oil or tung oil, which has been a lifelong favorite, or Danish oil by, I don't remember the name of the company. Who are those people? I need to get a new jar. Maybe, I think it's Watco Danish oil. Those have been my 3 go-to handle oils over the years. Tung oil probably my favorite since I was a little boy. But I will pour tung oil into the kerf and then soak the wedge with tung oil and then hammer it in. And that does several things. It lubricates it so it goes in easier, but it also swells the wood once it's there. Once I have the handle in, I'll have a little Tupperware container that's about 1 inch deep by 6 inches wide and 14 inches long. And I'll put a 1/2 inch of tung oil in the bottom of it and just sit the handle in it for a night or two, and the handle will soak up. You can tell when the liquid volume of the tung oil in the Tupperware goes down that the handle is wicking it up. and expanding. And periodically, if I ever have I don't really have loose axes, but once a year I'll take all of my axes and fill the Tupperware with tung oil or boiled linseed oil and just stick them in there for a night or two. And the Tupperware container, maybe I'll show it to you in a subsequent video. Tupperware hold 4 or 5 axes in it, and they'll wick up the tung oil. I may have to even add some more if I only put a ½ inch in to start with. And it will swell the wood, moisturize the wood. It's just good for it. So what I have here today is a couple of the axes that may have shown up in that video that gendered my question from my British friend. So let me grab one of them here. This is an old favorite by Council Tool. Let's see if I can get it to. I was going to put it in a vinegar bath and clean it up, but it looks kind of, I don't know, it looks sentimental to me with the paint remaining on it from when it was new years and years ago. You can see also that there is no secondary wedge in metal out of that thing. And if I hold it just right, let me see if I can get out of the way. You can see the angle of the wood poking out of there is 4 or 5 degrees. And at 4 or 5 degrees on a handle like this, it's not going to come out. I'm not against metal wedges if people like to do them. I don't have a dog in that fight. But I don't like doing things that I don't need to. And if I do a good job and pull the kerf all the way down within a 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch at the bottom of the axe head, and wedge it in until you can feel it pop in the bottom and it's not going to go anymore, and have a good 3-5 degrees angle on this thing, then there's really no need to put a secondary wedge in it. So I think I mentioned this old Council Tool. I got a couple more that I'm cleaning up of these old Councils. If you visited my channel and watched some of the older videos, you'll know that my hands-on favorite over the years have been my Norlands, since they were my sentimental favorite and my first axes as a little boy. And then I have a couple of my grandfather's axes that were his favorites that I'm kind of sentimentally attached to. But certainly for woodcraft adventures as a Boy Scout and going out in the modern age to practice bushcrafty stuff. I don't know where that word came from. When I was a boy, we weren't working in bushes, we were working with wood. I think I blame somebody in Alaska or maybe Australia. But for all of my woodcraft adventures and refreshing activities, the Norlands have been my favorite for years and years and years and years. And I've had some of those things for over 50 years. But recently, hanging out at the farm on a rainy day, the barrel that sits next to the ladder that goes up into the loft had a bunch of handles sticking out of it. And I went over to piddle with them while we were having our squall blow through. And all of them were Council tools, ranging anywhere from, I think, 2 1/4 pounds up to a 6-pound head that I purchased one year to replace. You hear that? So these guys go by. Blue Angels are flying today in Jacksonville. They're at Space Show. And that is not an F-18. It's like an F-22, so maybe they're having the F-22 part of the show. It is a little early for the Blue Angels today, so we may hear some Pratt & Whitney turbofan engine noise. So I'm talking about axes today. Hopefully it won't be too much of a nuisance. If it is, I'll erase this and redo it. But I had a friend that has some Swedish axes, and man, he loves those things. And really, what's not to love about S.A. Wetterlings and Gränsfors-Bruks, Husqvarna and Holtz-Brooks, and he had a favorite pair of Holtzbrook's axes, and one of mine that was my chief splitter and wedge banger for years was a Holtzbrook's 5-star Arvika. And his favorite's good, 4.5, 5-pound basic, maybe a Michigan or Dayton pattern. There's nothing exotic looking about it except it had really good steel and was very utilitarian. And he was in love with that thing, and so I replaced it with the Council Tools 6-pounder. Didn't get a whole lot of use with it since my favorite woodpile axes were a 5-pound Norland double bit and a 5.5-pound Norland single bit. It's just a big huge slab of metal with a razor sharp edge. But everything in the barrel, I think including the 4-pound splitting maul, were all Council Tools, and one of them that I'll be refitting here directly is an old Forest Service Pulaski. It's about 3.5 pounds. So FSS, I think, stood for Federal Supply Service, and this was a Council Tools too. Great axe, great tool. One summer as an intern with I don't remember whether BLM was the primary or the Forestry Service was, but as an intern, man, I spent a lot of time cutting lines with something just like this. And I found this in a store. One of my friends started cracking on me for it having a roll pin hole. If I remember right, somebody that's out there that really knows what they're doing in wildfire work, see if you can chime in on this. I think it was required. These things take such a huge beating, both as a hoe and as an axe, that I think the Forestry Service required that they have a roll pin just to stabilize them, because they really do get beat up. So I've got 36 inches of handle and nice hickory with a nice grain pattern that I'll be sorting out with this in the next week or two and bring that to you. Let's see. Speaking of 5.5-pound Norlands, yeah, here it is. And I think maybe this was their log splitter pattern. And if you can see 3 to 5 degrees where that wedge punches out the sides of the kerf. This axe head isn't going anywhere. This is my grandfather's Kelly Perfect Black Raven. You can see it's kind of beat up. Hardly make out the raven. Again, no secondary metal wedge. Again, 3 to 5 degrees. Oh, look how that spreads out. Gosh, that's pretty. And really, I don't have an attitude about I love this thing. I don't have an attitude about metal wedges. It's just that if you take your time and pull the kerf down close to the bottom and have a nice wedge with a good amount of degrees, and look, if you take a look at the end of this, the axe handle, though seated tightly on the bottom of this little octagon that I made for it out of Tennessee hickory, in the top it didn't even come to the edges of the head, and doesn't really need to. If you have a good wedge, it will fill all the way into the sides and still do a great job. When you do these, use your common sense. And for me, if I don't need to put in a metal wedge, then I don't need to put in a metal wedge. This one's another one of my grandfather's. It's, I think I mentioned in a video maybe that it was a 46. It's not. It's a 1947 by Sager Chemical. And I've got 2 of these heads. See the lines where I unrusted it with a vinegar bath. And somebody sent me a note, and they were kind of cracking on me about they certainly had some internet YouTube attitude about the lines showing for the tempering that come out when you soak it in a vinegar bath to get the rust out of it. And, you know, I don't really care if the tempering line or the quench line shows on the axe. Not polishing these up to make them shiny and all the same color, and fitting them to hopefully use out at the wood pile. So with this one, you can see, again, no metal wedge. You can see, again, that the wedge extends past where the kerf stopped. And has a nice, oh, this has a beautiful angle, friends. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, God, that's pretty. You know, it's a little weird when you think stuff like this is pretty, but down here in Florida, I don't think my wife thinks it's pretty, but thankfully she thinks that it's pretty attractive and sexy if I smell like sap and gasoline and chainsaw stuff. Howsoever, this is my grandfather's 1947 Sager chemical that's now mine. Haven't done anything else to it. I don't have any of them here. If you've seen my videos last winter when it was cold and rainy and I was getting over the throes of Lyme disease for, I almost said for therapy. There was some therapeutic value involved in doing it, but there's something very gratifying to me about cleaning up a bunch of my old Norlands, making new handles from good hickory stock, and are really fortunate to have a good lumber yard here. Not a Home Depot kind of store, but an honest-to-goodness lumber yard. And the guy keeps his eye peeled for nicely grained hickory for me because he knows I like it. It was just gratifying to make handles and hang them on axes. And the old handles had taken such a beating that I wrapped them in paracord and then put a wrap or two of 1-inch Gorilla Tape just to hold the paracord in place. And they almost look too new to mess with. And I really don't like owning things that I don't use. Are you there? And I need to get out, you know, this fall and use them. My problem in Florida is that last winter I split a cord and a half of rounds, and as hard as we tried to have a fire in the fireplace every time it was cool, I couldn't go through that whole cord and a quarter, cord and a half of rounds. So there's not a whole lot of axe work for me to do, and sadly I was enjoying myself and ran through it all in a day. And I was kind of full of myself at just shy of 60 going through a cord and a half with a couple of my favorite axes and splitting. But I don't know, we don't have enough cold weather here to have that much firewood, so I kind of miss it. So this year I think I'm just going to take all the axes out and love on them and give each of them a little test run so I can have my hands on them and beat them up just a little bit. It almost hurts my feelings that they look this new when I'm done with them, and I don't get to take them out since I'm not a forestry guy. I'm not an arborist. I'm not in the trees like the guys that do that for a living. So let's see what else is here. Also in my batch of stuff to refit, this is a old 3.5 pound Council Tools head. I think I had this one like on a 28-inch handle, and I use it. You know, it's not very sharp. I was using it as my faller's axe to pound in wedges, and it doesn't need to be sharp, but you know, it's an axe, so you want it to do a job. But had it on a 28-inch handle, which is just about right for banging wedges in. But I'm going to clean it up. I almost thought I'd put it in vinegar, but I think what I'm going to do, since it has such a nice patina and some of the original paint on it, is I'm going to put it on my wire wheel and see what it looks like. Instead of sticking this in vinegar like I had planned last week for some of those old Council Tools, I think I'm just going to put it on a wheel, see what it looks like. So when I get there, I'll make a little video and show it to you. This one is, I don't know if it'll show. almost 13.5 inches of 1926 Sager chemical. And I was going to throw it in vinegar too, but these things, once I got them from, this was another one from my grandfather, once I got them, they've been stored in rim oil or rubbed in linseed oil or tongue oil before you put them up in the wintertime and dressed. And there's no rust on it. There's a few hammer marks. There's not much pitting. So I think instead of the vinegar bath for this 26 Sager chemical, I'm just going to dress the edge. And behind me I have a couple of roughed hickory handles that I made, and one of them is 36. And I think a 36 for this beautiful 13-inch Sager chemical is going to be just about the right thing. It's beautiful, beautiful felling axe. One of my grandfather's favorites. It's funny, in my mind, when I was a little guy. Sorry, we were rudely interrupted with a Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor doing a flyover right over my house. It's impossible to speak and be heard when those things go over. Not quite as bad as a quartet or sextet of F-18 Hornets for the Blue Angels. But man, that thing was loud. But we were talking about my grandpa's Sager chemical. And when I was a kid, in my mind, this thing was so big. And at 13 inches, you know, Puget Sound patterns they're big. But man, what a beautiful geometry on this thing. This side is lean and thin, and man, it's a biter. And this side is more blunt and utilitarian, asymmetrical. Gosh, what's not to like? This is one of 3 Puget Sounds that I have. One of them is a Wells Zenith by Kelly Perfect, and the other one is, it's a Collins Legitimus. I have them off their old handles. I don't remember where I found them. As I've shared before, my polite fiction is that Gregory doesn't collect axes, but gee, friends, it's hard to go in a tool store or a junk store and see an old axe head that's that nice and not decide you just have to bring it home and love on it and keep it with you in Florida. Occasionally I have friends that would like to have an axe, and I'll keep my eye peeled for good deals, and they kind of know it's therapeutic for me to make a handle and hang a nice axe. So I love making axes for my friends, and by making I mean, I guess, restore and make a new handle and hang them, as opposed to actually making one and forging it, that kind of thing. Let me turn this off and I'll get to work. I have still some rough work to do on these 3 hickory handles. The 28-inch one is going to go on that little Council Tools 3.5-pound head, I think. The 2 singles are going to go probably on this Sager chemical and my old Pulaski. And once I get them roughed out and closer to hanging, we may do another video and include you on that. So, friends, thanks so much for stopping by. If you have questions or comment about anything, I love to see those things and love to answer them. So, have an awesome day, and thanks till we see you again.